Imagine a man so obsessed with his appearance, so impeccably dressed and well-groomed, that he didn't just earn a nickname from a chorus girl, he chose his own name from a Greek myth. He called himself Adonis, after the god of beauty and desire. But in the brutal world of New York City organized crime, Giuseppe Antonio Dotto was not just a pretty face. He was the strategic mastermind, the silent kingmaker, and the ultimate gentleman bootlegger, whose decisions shaped the future of the Mafia. This is not a story of a trigger-happy gangster, but of a sophisticated and viciously ambitious man who built an empire from the shadows. His journey began not in the slums of New York, but in the small town of Montemerano, Italy, where he was born in 1909. As a young boy in 1909, his family immigrated to the United States, settling in a Brooklyn that was a cauldron of opportunity for those willing to break the law. On the streets, the young Giuseppe, who would later become Joe, quickly fell in with a group of other ambitious future criminals. He formed an unbreakable bond with a shrewd young man named Charles Lucky Luciano. While Luciano was the charismatic idea man, Adonis was the steady, ruthless, and impeccably loyal partner. It was during this time that he shed his immigrant name for the one he felt suited him, Joe Adonis, a name that spoke to his vanity but would soon strike fear into the hearts of his enemies.
When Prohibition created a fortune to be made in illegal alcohol, Adonis, Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Bugsy Siegel formed a partnership that would change organized crime forever. While others ran roughshod, Adonis played the gentleman. He took charge of the bootlegging operations in Brooklyn and the theater district of Broadway, becoming a familiar face among the elite of show business. He wasn't just selling liquor, he was building a brand of power and influence from his base at Joe's Italian Kitchen, a Brooklyn restaurant that served as a meeting place for his expanding criminal enterprise. The 1920s saw a bloody war for control of the Italian underworld, the Castellamare War. Adonis was initially allied with Giuseppe "Joe" the Boss Masseria, alongside his friend Luciano. However, as the war turned, Luciano secretly plotted to switch sides. When Masseria got wind of the betrayal, he made a fatal error. He ordered Adonis to kill his own friend, Lucky Luciano. In a moment that defined his character, Adonis's loyalty to his partner outweighed his loyalty to his boss. He immediately warned Luciano of the plot, sealing Masseria's fate. On April 15, 1931, Luciano lured Masseria to a Coney Island restaurant for a meal of clams and red wine. At a prearranged signal, Luciano excused himself to the restroom. In that moment, Adonis, along with Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Bugsy Siegel, walked into the dining room and filled Masseria with bullets, ending the war and ushering in a new era of organized crime.
With Luciano now at the top, he reorganized the Mafia into the 5 families and established the National Crime Syndicate. As a reward for his unwavering loyalty and pivotal role in the assassination, Adonis was given a seat on the syndicate's board of directors. He controlled a vast criminal empire that included not only bootlegging, but also illegal gambling, labor racketeering, and hijacking. He was a master of corruption, placing dozens of politicians and high-ranking police officers on his payroll, which allowed his operations to run with impunity. But Adonis was not just a thug, he was a businessman. He invested in legitimate fronts, owning car dealerships in New Jersey and a Buick dealership in Brooklyn. When customers bought cars, his salesmen would intimidate them into buying protection insurance from his men. Despite his legitimate fronts and his gentlemanly veneer, he never lost his taste for the raw criminality of his youth, reportedly still participating in jewelry robberies. He was a paradox, a sharply dressed businessman who still got his hands dirty. By the 1940s, with Luciano in prison, Adonis was tasked with running the syndicate. He moved his base of operations and his family to a luxurious home in Fort Lee, New Jersey,
fleeing the anti-crime crusade of New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. In New Jersey, he opened lavish casinos and partnered with Meyer Lansky to expand into the illegal gambling meccas of Florida and Cuba. When Luciano was deported to Italy in 1946, Adonis was a key figure at the historic Havana Conference, willingly offering to cede his power back to his old friend so Luciano could run the syndicate from Cuba. The plan, however, was foiled by the U.S. government, but it demonstrated the profound respect and loyalty Adonis commanded.
The beginning of the end for Joe Adonis came not from a bullet, but from a subpoena. In 1950, he was summoned to testify before the televised Kefauver Commission hearings on organized crime. The nation watched as the polished, well-dressed Adonis repeatedly refused to answer questions, invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. While he avoided self-incrimination, he could not avoid the spotlight. The hearings exposed him as a top crime boss, making him a primary target for law enforcement. In 1951, he was convicted on gambling charges in New Jersey and sentenced to 2 to 3 years in prison. Upon his release, the federal government was waiting. Determined to dismantle the mob, they declared that Adonis was not a U.S. citizen, but an illegal alien who had never naturalized. He fought the charge, claiming he was born in Passaic, New Jersey, but the evidence proved he was born in Italy. After a long legal battle, he was given an ultimatum: deportation or life in prison. On January 3, 1956, Joe Adonis, the man who helped build the American Mafia, was forced to board an ocean liner bound for Naples, Italy. He left behind his wife, his children, and the empire he had spent a lifetime constructing. Exiled in Milan, he lived in a luxurious apartment, a king without a kingdom. When his old partner, Lucky Luciano, died of a heart attack in 1962, Adonis attended the funeral. He sent a massive floral wreath into the church with a simple, heartbreaking epithet: "So long, pal." It was a final, silent tribute to the man who had been at his side through the most violent and triumphant moments of his life. Joe Adonis died in Italy in 1971 of a heart attack, fittingly while being questioned by Italian police during an anti-mafia investigation. In the end, the U.S. government that had expelled him as an alien allowed his body to return. He was buried in Fort Lee, New Jersey, the place he had once called home. His story is not just one of crime and violence, but a quintessentially American tale of immigration, ambition, power, and the ultimate price of a life lived outside the law.